Hi everybody, my name's David Inman. Welcome to this webinar on facilities management strategy beyond COVID-19. I've written this webinar really as I'm seeing some fantastic facilities management practice as we lift the restrictions in the United Kingdom from coronavirus. However, this webinar does not give legal advice, and if you identify any legal risks following you watching this video, please, you should seek advice from a legal professional. Also, all recommendation and updates from your relevant authorities should always be followed during these times. Going back to basics, I'm referring back to my previous webinar on strategic facilities management. The definition of facilities management, ISO 41001, is the international standard for facility management. And that standard says facility management is the organisational function which integrates people, place and process within the built environment with the purpose of improving the quality of life of people and the productivity of the core business. I'm going to take this theory one step further and look at some of the fantastic practices being put in place that I'm seeing as we lift the restrictions on the COVID-19 lockdown in the United Kingdom. As I've said, facilities management is about people, places and processes. But with COVID-19, in terms of people, they can catch COVID-19 and they can also transmit it. Places can aid transmission of the virus, and processes can reduce risk of transmission of the virus or actually accelerate the transmission. The COVID-19 pandemic is a subject that changes daily, so we need to plan for now and also plan for future scenarios, including preparing for a second wave of cases and put in place contingency plans. Contingency plans you may have already tested with the first wave of the virus. One thing to consider though is if you've got closed and unoccupied premises, you may want to check your insurance arrangements with your insurers to what arrangements you need to take whilst the premises is closed and unoccupied. In the United Kingdom, the legal restrictions for lockdown for COVID-19 are slowly being lifted, and this means commercial offices and other commercial premises are reopening. I've started visiting commercial properties, namely commercial offices, as part of my work, and I'm seeing some really carefully measured COVID-19 management scenarios already being put into place even before the buildings are officially reopened and occupied by tenants. But we need to build a strategy for your facilities management ethos for COVID-19. And for this strategy, as all strategies, you need to measure results against key performance outcomes. But these outcomes will change, and you've got to reflect this in your strategy. You may have to change your instant response arrangements. You may not have physically closed your commercial premises, or they may have temporarily closed before reopening them. That needs to be part of your strategy. But risk assessment of all this is a key process. But also consider your reputational risk. And this reputation could be having a coronavirus hotspot in your commercial premises and being blamed for not implementing enough social distancing or hygiene procedures or having a robust enough cleaning procedure. These are reputational risks you also need to plan in your facilities management strategy. First of all, let's look at the financial strategy. Now is the perfect time to check your business continuity arrangements. With the pandemic, we've been through probably the most critical business continuity exercise in recent times. And this means now is the perfect time to reflect upon those decisions you made and maybe prepare for a second wave of the virus. And also, check your business continuity for any other unplanned events that may occur in the future. But you're going to be putting extra controls in place if you're managing a commercial property. So, who pays for those controls? So think very carefully about service charges and how you would apply any additions to the service charge with resilience for COVID-19, such as extra social distancing and extra cleaning. Next, think about customer and stakeholder. And this will incorporate health and safety on your premises. And very carefully linked to this, infection control. You'll have an increased awareness and application of health and safety, which a lot of it will be delivered by hygiene procedures. But unfortunately, people may enter your building who may later on show symptoms of COVID-19. You'll need to have infection control and isolation facilities to manage those people, and also implement any track or trace arrangements your organisation or your area of operation may have. In terms of operational excellence, this as always is the efficiency and effectiveness of operations, and also your site safety, which is increasingly critical at this time as staff safety includes infection control. And finally, part of your strategy should be innovation and learning, and continual improvement and collaborative learning throughout your workplaces in what is a dynamically changing environment. Now, we looked at this strategic facilities management model in my previous webinar on the subject, but going to apply COVID-19 controls to this strategic facilities management model. And the controls will be applied through your tactical planning and execution. So as part of your performance review for operations and maintenance, there's going to be certain operation and maintenance planning for reopening workplaces and workspaces after COVID-19. First is going to be the status of your planned preventative maintenance, and this can include availability of engineered, some may have been furloughed, or some may be off work. Are your facilities management service providers still operating? So you may now have to carry out a market capability review should some of your existing suppliers not be able to offer the services that you require. At the front end of facilities management at this time are your cleaning services. So think about the frontline availability of cleaning staff. Do they have suitable chemicals, PPE and risk management? And is your cleaning service going to be expanded for infection control? And you may start thinking about rationalising various cleaning services providers in your building to one provider. So you'll have one cleaning provider for tenants and common areas, allowing a seamless service and also a consistent service. And I hope you're seeing what's becoming apparent. You're going to need to plan for building operations for both managers and your tenants. You'll need to think about transport and access. Think about pedestrian routes, plus good delivery and any temporary decontamination storage. You may want to avoid cross-contamination by closing off meeting rooms. And you'll have to think about social distancing having an impact on how people enter and leave the building. For example, you've got a building of 2,000 people with 4 elevators. If you're only allowing one person in that elevator at one time, the building is going to take quite a long time to occupy. So think about how efficiently and safely you can access and egress the building. So think about social distancing and its application to accessing and egressing the building, both in normal operation and in emergency scenarios. And also consider hours required for access if the working day becomes longer due to shift working which is caused by social distancing. So you may have the building access in operation longer than usual. You're going to be expected to supply enhanced personal hygiene and hand washing facilities. So, do you have enough hand washing chemicals, hand sanitising chemicals, and also do you have the COSH assessments for those? For your security and CCTV, it may be that your CCTV has not been tested for quite a while since your building was unoccupied, so you'll need to recommission and test your CCTV. Also, with possible different shift times and working patterns, are your security staff going to have an accurate building occupation list should there be an emergency? The next part of the strategic FM model we're going to look at is a performance review of your compliance. During COVID-19, you may have different compliance obligations, such as social distancing, and you must identify and implement actions, but also check that you are compliant when you add your controls. Whilst this list is not exhaustive, we're going to now look at some of the key compliance challenges. And the first one is COVID-19 legislation, and the main one with this in the UK is social distancing. Especially if the building has been unoccupied for a period, you will want to recheck your fire arrangements. You may also need to recheck and revisit and update your fire risk assessment due to increased social distancing in the building, and also how you're going to consider social distancing during a fire evacuation scenario. There could be a big difference in what data you hold, process, and therefore your data protection arrangements may have changed. You may now require to hold health data for building occupiers, both for your own staff and for your tenant staff. So you must have a clear and legally compliant policy and implement any processes when you're retaining this data. With access control and security, you may have to implement queuing policies for elevators in order to maintain social distancing. Especially if a building has been unoccupied, you may want to increase your water hygiene arrangements. And also consider, is your wastewater discharge still effective, especially if you've got grease traps in your system? Do these need clearing? Is any maintenance on the sewage discharge and the wastewater discharge required, again, after if your building has been unoccupied for a period of time? We've already discussed social distancing that may be required for waiting lines and queues for elevators. But also think about the physical infrastructure associated with elevators and any other lifting equipment. You've still got to maintain that lifting equipment and operations meet statutory requirements. Finally, we're going to look at infection control, which in the majority of commercial premises is a new discipline. You may want to install physical social distancing, such as plexiglass screens, but you may also want to arrange a quarantine area for a person showing symptoms of COVID-19. You may have that quarantine area outside or inside, but also consider vehicular access to the quarantine area so that the person under quarantine can be picked up and transported either to their home address or to a medical facility. So once we've established our strategic facilities management model applying COVID-19 controls, we need to communicate this. And communication is the key in applying all your facilities management strategy elements to both management and tenants. And items you may want to communicate include any reopening schedules, including a strategy and your intended actions, both again to management and tenants. communicating any changes to your strategy, communicating possible scenarios, and this should be aligned with the government advice changing, so this advice needs to be dynamic. You should also consider what steps you need to take and who to refer any requests to from journalists and the media regarding your building and your COVID-19 controls. Also, you may want to consider social media linked to the premises that you're managing to prevent false information. But there needs to be a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue with all of the building users. And if the building is used by members of the community, such as for a community building, there needs to be an element of community interaction. You should always validate your communications policy, and a feedback process is very useful for this validation. And this feedback should be feeding in to your corporate strategy and how your strategic facilities management model evolves. Some further reading that may be useful are the RICS guidance notes on Beyond COVID-19. And the two related to this webinar is the one on reopening of commercial buildings and also data protection and reopening the property market. I'd also recommend the Strategic FM Framework RICS guidance notes, and I'd also recommend the ISO 41001 Facility Management Standard. We hope you found this webinar useful, and if you have, please subscribe to our channel. We've published several other webinars on COVID-19, and I'll put the links to those in the text below. Thanks very much for watching. Everybody stay safe, stay alert, and let's control the virus. Thanks for watching.